The last thing anyone wants on a Friday afternoon in peak holiday time are travel delays. Widespread power cuts across England and Wales around 5 p.m. yesterday caused chaos across the transport system. A free-for-all on the roads as traffic lights went down and trains stopped mid-journey when rail signals failed too. Even staff seemed to be in the dark about what was happening.
Have we got an update as to getting the problems resolved on these trains?
As the lights went out, people were forced to navigate trains, stations and even Newcastle Airport using phone lights. Commuters faced hours stuck on board. Some decided to continue their journey on foot. Others had no choice but to wait.
We stopped 3 times. The first one, everyone was kind of high spirits. The second one, everyone was a bit annoyed that the other train was leaving first, but still everyone was chatting, it was friendly and nice. The third one, about 1:30 in the morning, was not so great. Everyone was just sleepy, tired, people were just, falling asleep, and it was quite low energy at that point and everyone just wanted to go home, but no one really had any answers.
Today we know more about why the power cut happened. 2 big power stations went down in 2 minutes. First at a gas power plant in Bedfordshire, then at a wind farm in Yorkshire. The loss of 2 stations in such close succession meant there wasn't enough backup energy to meet demand, and so the plug was pulled in some areas, leaving almost 1 million people without power.
It looks like a really rare event. We had a similar circumstance in 2008 where we saw 2 generators disconnect from the system at the same time, have a fault at the same time. We'll look really closely at that over the coming days and weeks, but at the moment it looks just like a really rare and unusual set of circumstances.
You see in purple the main high voltage system run by National Grid.
Imperial College London are doing research projects with the industry to sustain energy on the grid as we switch to greener sources. You can't say for sure, can you, that this wouldn't happen again tomorrow, say, or next week?
No, because it's probabilities. It's the risk of a power station shutting down quickly, which we can cope with, but then it's the risk of a second one shutting down quickly shortly afterwards. And that could happen in the next 5 minutes, or it might not happen for 20 years. It's just the probabilities. So you guard against the probability. You can do the mathematics that tells you how you reduce the risk, but you reduce the risk, you don't eliminate the risk of power cuts happening.
To minimise that risk, there's a trade-off. Higher electricity bills to pay for storing backup energy. So after yesterday's disruption, today's question: can we tolerate the odd power cut to stop energy prices rising further?
Well, I'm joined now by the former chair of the National Infrastructure Commission, Lord Adonis. Do you think, once every 10 or 11 years is a reasonable price to pay, or is infrastructure too vulnerable?
This isn't acceptable, what happened. The fact that it did happen 11 years ago should have been a warning signal to the National Grid, and they should have put resilience planning in place that means it didn't happen again. I mean, what happened 11 years ago was 2 power stations going down simultaneously, not having immediate switched supply to come on. And that's what happened yesterday, and they should have learnt the lessons from before, and it shouldn't have recurred. And the second element of this, which is very concerning, is why when there was this shortage of power, why it was that one of the first bits of the system to be affected was a large part of the national transport system, and in particular, part of the rail system with the lines radiating out of London.
Well, is it possible to switch?
That shouldn't have happened.
I mean, is it possible for National Grid to protect, key infrastructure, key manufacturing, and just make sure that when power cuts have to happen, it's homes and offices?
Yeah, it's absolutely possible. They're saying today that the National Grid needs to give a fuller account of what happened and what their resilience planning is. They're saying this was the system, the fail-safe mechanisms, but they designed the system, and the design of the system is not good enough. It's not good enough that we have a situation where when 2 simultaneous power cuts happen, as has happened now twice in the last 11 years, that there isn't backup supply that comes on immediately, and it's not good enough that core elements of the national infrastructure suffer in the way that they did yesterday when this happens. The whole job of National Grid is to see that they do have resilience planning in place to avoid precisely what's happened in the last 24 hours.
Well, does it raise any questions in your mind about how these things are owned and regulated? I mean, should National Grid be run by the government?
Well, to be blunt, I don't think that the government running it would have made any inherent difference. It's the quality of the management and the quality of the resilience planning. Now, National Grid has been pretty good in the past. It's been 2 serious incidents, though, of this kind in the last 11 years. That is too many. And yesterday isn't satisfactory, and National Grid have to give a good account of themselves, and they have to put in place immediate changes to see this doesn't happen again. And of course, it does put up in lights the importance of resilience and contingency planning. That, you know, we have systems like this in all parts of our national infrastructure, and it's very, very important that they're properly managed.
I mean, at the moment, all the conversations about resilience are actually to do with no deal. Now, we know where you're coming from on no deal. You're vehemently against it. You're vehemently against Brexit. But, I mean, is there anything that we need to be thinking about as a result of yesterday with regard to Brexit?
Well, I'm not for a moment saying that what happened yesterday had a connection with Brexit. They didn't. Let's be absolutely clear. And I don't want anybody thinking there that somehow our electricity supplies are going to be in danger because of Brexit. What I would flag up, though, as a former chair of the National Infrastructure Commission, is the absolutely central importance to our economic systems of having good resilience planning and good contingency planning. And if you just look at this issue of electricity generation, we have 15 nuclear power stations at the moment, which account for a quarter of our electricity supply. They are mostly going out of service in the next 10 to 15 years. We still do not have in place, as a country, a proper policy for the next generation of electricity generation, and that needs to take place now.